Hello, this is Elmira Strange from the Career Woman Success Academy, where you can have a fulfilling and successful career, make more money in your company, and focus on your dreams to make them reality. Welcome to my today's video, how to cope with stress for the busy career woman. In this video, you will learn 3 best ways that will help you to deal with stress on a daily basis. I often see people who get stressed, and the way they cope with stresses is usually by eating some junk food and by venting their frustration to somebody else. But here I want to share with you 3 best ways to deal with stress very effectively. You might get stressed because you had an argument with somebody in your office, or maybe because you planned so much in the day and there's no way you can accomplish all of that. Or maybe because you got stuck in the traffic jam again. Whatever it is, that stress eventually can make you seriously ill, and it is up to you to deal with it effectively, to minimize it on a daily basis, or to learn how to let it go. So the first effective way is called repressive coping. So with repressive coping, you're trying to banish the negative thoughts from your mind. Thoughts that remind you about that stressful situation. So basically you're trying to avoid thinking about what made you stressed today. Well, the research shows that this way of coping can be used only short term, because in the long term, you don't really deal with the problem. The problem is always there. The stresses are there. They get into you every day. And by avoiding them every day won't help your situation. You might know somebody who is always positive and cheerful on a daily basis, and sometimes you even hate them because everybody gets stressed and this person isn't. What exactly does she do or he do to make themselves so cheerful? Don't they have problems? In reality, that person is using repressive coping. Yeah, the stressful things happen to them as well, but they've learned how to let them go very quickly, how to not to think about that stressful situation. They become so good at it with the practice that it seems that nothing ever happens to them. You might be familiar with a book or a movie which called Gone with the Wind, where the main heroine, Scarlett, was using that method of repressive coping. When she faced the stressful situation, she would say to herself, I'm not gonna think about it today, I'm gonna think about it tomorrow. And tomorrow never came, and she didn't really think about it. She was just using that method. So the downside of this approach is its difficulty. It's difficult not to think about something that caused you so much stress, especially if, for example, you had a disagreement with somebody at your work. But for this type of situation, I used a variation of that approach where I actually imagine a box where I put all my problems into that box and I put it on the shelf. Of course, I do it in my mind. I don't have an actual box, but I know that thinking about that situation is not going to improve it in any way, and it's not going to be solved either. So if you can imagine things, imagine the box where you fill up with your little stressful situations or little problems and just put it on a shelf till tomorrow, like Scarlett said. So the second way of dealing with stress is called rational coping, which is the opposite of the previous one. The rational coping means you're facing the stressor, you are thinking about it, you're reflecting upon it, and you're trying to deal with it effectively. So if you want to use rational coping, you do 3 steps. First is acceptance, which means that you accept that the situation or the stressor won't vanish just because you're avoiding thinking about them. The problem or the stressor is still there and you need to deal with it effectively, even if it's so difficult. The second one is exposure, where you are looking for that person or the stressor. Maybe even not in the physical sense that you're actually going and looking for them, but you are thinking about that stressor, you reflect on it, and you're trying to make some conclusions or how you can deal with it on a daily basis. For example, if somebody is getting on your nerves at your work, with this approach, you actually think what it is you can do to either avoid that person, or maybe one of you can change the department, or maybe you don't have to share the task with that person. Or perhaps you can actually talk to somebody in your office, somewhere senior, that might help you to solve that problem. Or perhaps you travel every day to work and it becomes unbearable. Trains are not running on time. If you're driving a car, you're constantly in some jam, in some traffic. So with this approach, you can't just avoid it. You can't just not think about it. So here you do think about it, and you do think of ways that you can change that situation. Whether you can change the route that you take to work, whether you can take some other transport, or maybe even you can work from home some days. So with a rational coping, you're facing the problem, you think about it, and you find the ways of dealing with that problem. You're not avoiding it. This strategy is very good, especially long term. But if you have some little stresses that pop up occasionally in your day, then maybe letting them go would be easier than thinking about them and dealing with them like in this approach. So, and the last thing you can do, it's called reframing. So basically in this approach, you're trying to imagine a different scenario in your head. So say, for example, somebody made you really frustrated or angry today, and you can't stop thinking thinking about the situation that made you so stressed. So instead of going over and over of this situation in your head, you think about it slightly differently. You actually create a different scenario for this situation. Imagine that situation as if it didn't happen to you, but it happened to somebody else. But you can see it from the outside. When you see yourself from the outside, you might think of other ways of how you could handle that situation better. What could you say? When we're trying to think of that situation from the outside perspective, we can see it a bit differently. It's not that emotional anymore. We can think about it rationally. So the main point of this approach is to imagine yourself as an outsider when you are thinking about the situation that made you stressed. So by doing that, you actually minimize the impact of that situation. It doesn't become that real anymore. And maybe even you become slightly detached of that situation. But whatever approach you use, always think about yourself as you would about your best friend. What would you say to your best friend? This is how you talk to yourself in your mind. If the best advice you could give to your friend is to think about that situation and make some conclusions, then this is what you say to yourself. But if the best advice is to actually let it go, then use this advice for yourself. Try to let it go. So just to summarize it, people often try to manage their problems by suppressing them, by not thinking about them, and by avoiding those stressful situations. But interestingly, this is not the best way to cope with a stressful situation, because then you're avoiding the situation which doesn't really go away. It doesn't go away and you don't deal with it properly. However, it is really great as a short-term solution if something doesn't repeat in your life all the time. And if it does, then use rational coping or reframing. Face the problem and reflect on it, or reframe the situation that you could have a different perspective on it, and then you can make the needed changes. Well, I hope you really liked this video today and found it useful in any way. If you do, then please put it in the comments below. I would love to hear what you think about this video. Does it help you at all? And if you have your own strategies that you use every day to cope with the stresses, please share with everybody else by writing about it in the comments box below. Feel free to share my video on your favorite social platform, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I'll see you in my next video.